Um, Good evening, everybody. My name is Lynette Owens, and I am the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. And tonight's evening, called Family Tech Talk Night, is something we've been doing for 10 years now in partnership with PTO Today. So we thank our partner PTO Today for a great collaboration and giving us the ability to bring this important information and these conversations to parents all across the United States. Again, if you're just joining us, please choose the globe icon on the bottom if you prefer to listen to the evening in Spanish. A little bit about myself. I actually founded the program for Trend 13 years ago. I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son, and I'm dialing in from the Boston area. So I know there's a few Massachusetts schools on tonight. Hello, neighbors. As I said earlier, if you need to listen in Spanish, please choose the globe. At any point during the evening, and I know you will have them, please use the Q&A option to submit your questions. I'm more likely to see it if it's submitted in the Q&A versus the chat. But I will be engaging you and encourage you to use the chat to communicate with each other. At the end of the session, when you log off of Zoom, there will be a very, very short survey that pops up, and we would love your feedback. This helps us to improve the program every year. So yes, I think someone answered. Thank you for answering that in the chat. Use the 3 dots and then you'll see the globe and then you can pick Spanish. Okay, great. So welcome to everybody. And I don't know if you know this, but tonight we have 61 schools from 26 states across the United States. And it's really awesome to see you all gathering as parents who care a lot about your children and the role that technology is playing in their lives. So welcome. What you see next to the name of your school, this is in alphabetical order, is a code. And your PTO or PTA leader may have required you to use this as a way of letting them know that you attended tonight's event. So I will show this screen again later on tonight, but take a note of your school code, which you see in red to the right of your school's name. So hello, everybody from everywhere across the United States. Very happy to be with you tonight. So I'd like to get to know you a little better. And I'm going to start with a couple of questions. So if you could use the polling option and let me know the answer to these questions. How old is your oldest child? Are they A, 5 years old or younger, B, 6 to 10 years old, C, 11 to 14 years old, or D, 15 or older? How old is your oldest child? A, B, C, or D? I've already told you mine are on the older end of the spectrum here, but I did get to watch them over the last 13 years go through this process of learning to use technology and all the challenges and triumphs that come with it. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll here. So it looks like we're pretty close in the middle of the pack here with the majority of you. Your oldest children are between 6 and 10, and the next largest group between 11 and 14. So congratulations on making it through the pandemic this far. I can't imagine how challenging this past year might have been for you all. And we'll talk about some of the things that maybe you can continue to do long after the pandemic is over. And maybe there are things you want to change because of the pandemic. Great. So now I'd like to ask the next question to get to know you. What are you most interested to learn about tonight? Is it A, managing my kids' screen time? helping them stick to content that's appropriate for their age, dealing with online bullying or hate, getting some ideas for the positive uses of the internet. And I'm not sure, I'm just here to learn something new. There are no wrong answers here, just trying to get to know you a little bit better. What are you most interested to learn about tonight? Okay, and I imagine, given the age ranges of your kids, that the answers you've provided are not too surprising. I think it's pretty typical. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop the polling in just 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you. So it looks like most of you want to talk about how to help them stick to age-appropriate content. So probably conversations around filtering and also resources where you can find out about what's good for my kids. And another group of you, managing screen time, not a surprise either. That's probably been one of the greatest challenges over the last year. And we'll talk about some tips on ways that you can think about screen time and also make sure your kids are balancing it in a healthy way. So, but all of these are issues we will touch briefly upon, and some of them I'll spend a little bit more time on given your responses to this question. So thank you. Oops, all right. So a lot changed over the past year, and I don't think we need to belabor this point any longer. We probably could all write very interesting autobiographies about 2020. But there are some things that didn't change. You know, one of the things that did change was our relationship to the internet and our children's relationship to the internet. Perhaps they were forced into remote learning and using sites, apps, and devices they had never done before for school. Maybe you finally said yes to Disney Plus for a while, or found a way to have a family movie night with some Netflix series together, or learned how to use Zoom for the first time ever with your, multiple generations of people. Whatever it was, we know that there was a high increase in internet use, higher adoption, and many apps who enjoyed tremendous growth. But there are some things that didn't change. One of those is that our children still need our guidance, and I appreciate that you're all here tonight for this very reason, because the risks to them are still there on the internet. Risks of, inappropriate content, unwanted contact, and maybe, not a healthy balance of time online and off. But what is also there and had remained there all this time were the benefits to using technology as well, not just for school, but also for us as family, and for them to develop and nurture relationships that they didn't do in that way before. So that is why now more than ever, teaching our kids to be great digital citizens is extremely important. Now, what do we mean by that? It's actually multiple parts. And what's interesting is many of you in that previous question had some interest in different parts of this. So we will touch upon all of it, and some of it a little more deeply than others. The first is that we have to teach our kids what the risks are and how to avoid them. We have to have conversations about safety and security. And beyond conversations, we should know what the tools are that we can use to help keep them safe. But we also have to talk about digital literacy. And what we mean by that is the how. Even if I know that using privacy settings is important, if I've impressed that upon my children, the next step is how do I actually use them? And that's an example of digital literacy, the how. How do I do it? The third thing is about ethics and community. How do I behave in ways that are good for me, but also good for everybody else? What are the rules when I join a social network for the first time of how I am or are not allowed to engage with other people on it? And finally, mastery. Very often when we talk to children about using technology, it's a long list of what not to do. And it really is important for us to balance that conversation with the ways in which they should be using technology, both in what we say and how we act, the example we set for them. It is just as important for them to know, how should I use the internet in ways that are productive and positive? So we have to remember that part of the conversation too. So we like to break this down into 4 easy to remember pieces. Be online. We know that in the past year there wasn't a choice. We were online because we had to be, but we know that in the future it's also important for our kids to understand how to use the internet and technology. But it is our job as parents to help them while they're there, to be safe, to be kind, and to be savvy. So what do we mean by each of these? Being online as parents rests a lot on us. Are we setting up the right environment, setting up the right rules, and setting a good example for them? On safety, how do we teach them to and help them be good digital citizens and understand the risks of how to protect their privacy, their personal information, and even their physical selves? On kindness, how do we treat others, but also increasingly, because internet use is so social, how do we make sure that our children know how to direct some of that kindness towards themselves too? And finally, on being savvy, this is the conversation about how we encourage good habits and good uses, the conversation about mastery, the things we do want them doing with technology. So when we think about being online and setting up the environment specifically, there are the physical parts of that environment. And I won't go into too much here because you have had to manage this as families for a year now. But I do think sometimes we have to remind our children, it's bad for your eyes if you're staring at the screens all day long. So, make sure you look up once in a while. The 30-30-30 rule is a great rule that children of any age can begin to practice. Every 30 minutes, look away, maybe outside the window for 30 feet for 30 seconds. Don't just stare at the screen. Another way to do that is just get up and move. But 30-30-30 is a great rule, or using blue light glasses. They're inexpensive. You don't need a prescription for them. You can buy them on Amazon, but over time, even for us, that blue light being emitted from laptops and phones can do damage cumulatively to the backs of our eyes. So we really should consider taking care of our physical selves too, and teaching our children to do the same. Another part about setting up the environment is the technology. And I am going to go a little bit more deeply into this piece here. And please submit your questions using the Q&A so I can more readily see those if you have them as it comes out. So the first thing is to limit access to your router. So a lot of times you buy a router, maybe you got a new one over the past year. It comes with a password, and then people never change it. So if you haven't changed it in a while, I recommend you do that. Another thing you can do with your home router is to separate how you're using it between your kids and you. What do I mean by that? Many routers let you have a main network and a guest network. And it's a good idea for devices that have sensitive information. Let's say your work laptop, work iPad connects to the main network, but maybe your kid's Xbox or PlayStation or Kindle reader connects to the guest network. Why do I say that? Because if for some reason your children accidentally click or tap on something on the screen, and maybe that was actually not something they should have or was safe to do, and somehow that's compromised their device, it will protect your network. It will protect your sensitive devices from being impacted by that. So by separating who's on which part of the network, you can help set up a safer environment for all of you. Wi-Fi extenders, you can buy them at Best Buy or on Amazon. That just makes sure, your Wi-Fi is good in other parts of your house. But, if a lot of your children are still going to school in remote ways, or even if they're not going remote anymore, but they need to use technology for schoolwork, and so do you for home, for work. Sometimes you got to separate in the house, and this just helps with your connectivity. And having conversations about when are you going to be online, so you're not bumping into each other and slowing it down. Again, we've been doing it for a year. Maybe you've mastered this already as a family. Just some ideas, though, for setting up your environment. On security, there's a few things you really need to consider, especially because your children may be using technology more than ever, that on every device you and they are using to connect to the internet should have security software. This includes phones, by the way, every device. And if you're not sure what to use, go to any search and look for the top 10 products out there to install on phones, iPads, laptops, desktops, and so on. Trend has a product, but there's many other great ones out there too. I would just recommend look up the top ones and make sure you have it. And inside those products, there's something called a firewall. Make sure that is turned on. Firewall acts like a security guard. It's looking at the traffic going in and out of that device and saying, that one's okay, but that one's not. So make sure that is on. We'll talk about passwords. That's a really fun way to have your kids practice good, strong password skills in a minute. If you're not also aware, there's something called two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. This is a feature. It's a setting in almost every app you probably use. Facebook has it, Instagram has it, TikTok has it, Roblox has it. Every app that your kids or you love using has this setting. And what it is basically a second lock on top of the password. So how does it work? Once you turn it on, you still need to enter a password. But after that, you're going to get a code. Sometimes it's texted to your phone. Sometimes it's sent to an email, however you want to receive it. And unless someone has your phone or your email, they cannot get into your account because maybe they stole your password. Maybe someone got a hold of your password. But if you have multi-factor authentication on, they cannot get in because they don't have your phone or your email address to get that code. So if you have not turned on two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, it's also called two-step verification sometimes, please turn that on every app your kids are using. It is important to do this because we know that over the pandemic period, the amount of breaches and hacking and the activity of cyber criminals is at an all-time high because they know we're on the internet. So we know that lots of passwords and email addresses have been leaked out there. Multi-factor authentication can help protect you. And I highly recommend you turn it on every app you're using after today if you haven't done it before. Finally, if you're connecting outside of your home, make sure you're using a virtual private network. Don't use free Wi-Fi. You can use free Wi-Fi, but when you use it, make sure you also log into a virtual private network. This will protect the information you're sending to a website to be, private or secure while it's in transit between you and the site that you're sending it to. Again, just like security software, do a search of the best virtual private network offerings out there. And there's plenty of options, plenty of options. Now, other things you can do, again, if your children have not done this on their devices in a while, on the Xbox or gaming device in a while, on your own phone in a while, update those apps. The updates have been coming really quickly and frequently over the course of the year, especially because, sometimes the update is just to improve the user experience. But many times those updates are because they discovered a vulnerability, a security hole. So try and make sure you update as frequently as possible. And make sure if you do the option, let's say on your phone, update all, that can drain your battery quite quickly. So make sure it's plugged in before you hit update all. On strong passwords, this one tactic you could use with your kids. First, tell them that longer passwords are stronger, okay? The longer it is, the stronger it is. But a lot of sites don't let you have a password that just goes on forever. So one trick is to make the password actually a sentence. You can come up with a fun sentence with your children and use just the first letter of each word as the password. Throw in a number or a special character like an exclamation point to make it even stronger, and then change it. And do this with them. Practice. This is a great skill to have them do. It's not too early to practice this. They can think of fun sentences like "My dog loves cheese," or something like that. And finally, back everything up and store it. You can use, if you're an Apple family, go ahead and use the iCloud. If you want to pay a little bit more for extra space, go ahead and do that. If you're a Google Android family, use the Google Cloud. Pay a little bit more if you need. But I recommend, in addition to the cloud backups, to have the actual drives that you can buy too, because if ever one or the other of those was compromised, the hard drive or the cloud, you have a backup. I'm speaking from personal experience, by the way. This happened to us. So thankfully we had both options. And just something I highly recommend, especially because your kids are part of that too, taking photos and uploading things and creating things as well. On tech tools, these are tools that are already there. They're free to you. They help with things like, I want to make sure my kid doesn't see something that's not appropriate for their age, or I don't want them spending lots of money on this app, or I don't want them on this app for such a long period of time. Or I just want to know what they're doing, monitoring, okay? And you can find these settings or tools in a lot of places now, far more than you could 5 years ago. Sometimes they're in the routers, in the devices themselves, like an iPad or Android phone. And a lot of them are sitting inside the apps now too. So I'm going to show you a few now. The first is iOS screen time. So go ahead and put in the chat, anybody ever use iOS screen time with your kids? If you have, it's a great tool that can help you do a lot of things. The first is that you can actually limit the time that they're. So TikTok family pairing is a great setting. I don't know if anybody is using TikTok family pairing right now, but you can actually, it's a way for you to set up your child to use TikTok with your oversight. And the way that it works is it sits under a setting called digital well-being. You select family pairing, and then you assign your phone as the parent and your child's device as the child's device. So you have to install TikTok on both your device and theirs, and you designate one of them as the parents and one of them as the child's. And once you have done that and you set up family pairing, you as the parent from your own device can decide to filter out content that might not be appropriate for their age. You can filter, you can limit the amount of time, you can decide how much time they're going to spend on TikTok, and you can limit who can contact your child. I think this is a great, kudos to TikTok for starting this a year ago, because it certainly is, TikTok is a lot like YouTube right now, where you have no idea, even if you see an innocent video, you don't know what's coming next. So this works pretty well. I've tested it. It's not 100% perfect, but it's a great way if you're not ready as a parent or you feel your child's not ready for full TikTok yet. To Hello, everybody. I really apologize. I have no idea what happened with that. Again, the irony of talking about technology and then having a technology issue happen. But I appreciate your patience and we'll continue forward. So what I was talking about was actually Roblox. So I'm hoping everybody got that on Roblox. Um, and Roblox has multiple settings that allow you to make sure it's a safe experience for your children. So, and I love it. It sounds like people do play Roblox, so that's great. So here you can see, and hopefully, I hope this doesn't slow down the Zoom connection, but they have a great video on their site. Maybe I won't play it just for the sake of the connection right now. But you set up a code, go to security, set up a code, a 4-digit code. And then once you have set that up, you go back in and set up privacy settings. And the privacy settings allow you to limit who can connect with your kids, limit who can actually, who they can chat with, and so on. So take a look at that. If you have not turned this on your children's Roblox, please make sure you do that. It's a great tool to protect them from, contact with people that you might not want them to be contacted by. The second thing about Roblox you should know is they have a pretty robust team of community moderators. So many of their games allow a child to free text chat with the other players, okay? But their moderators are watching the conversations. And if a child, is asked for their home address and they enter it, the moderation tools, the moderation processes of Roblox actually will not allow phone numbers and home addresses to be posted on those chats. So, is it perfect? Maybe not, but you should know that they work really hard to keep it a safe place because lots of kids are on Roblox, but not everybody on Roblox is a kid. Okay. Let's move to Google. So for those of you who are not Apple families, you're Android families, let's say. Google launched about a couple of years ago the same kind of thing that Apple has with iOS screen time. It's called Google Family Link. Google Family Link is a free app that you can get on the Android store, and it allows you to do a lot of management of your children's Android devices, like, okay, they're not allowed to download this app because of the age, or I don't want them using this app or just being on the internet for more than this amount of time. Or I can even, if they're got a mobile device, track them, just like you can with the iPhones and the Find My Phone feature. Now, the thing about Google is they own one of the most popular apps out there, one of the most popular apps out there, and that is YouTube. So YouTube today, if you want it to be safe for kids, you have two options. Number one, use the YouTube for Kids app. The YouTube for Kids app. If your child is young enough and they still like Elmo, it's perfect. But if your child is around 10 or 11, like mine were, and said, I really don't want, I'm kind of over Elmo by now. Your second option with YouTube is to allow them to use the full-on YouTube that adults do. Yeah, but what can you do today? You can do two things. Number one, YouTube has a setting called safety mode, okay? And how you set this up is you need a Google account, first of all. You can do a search on YouTube safety mode, okay? And when you turn on safety mode, it requires the person who turns it on to enter your password for Google, right? Or Gmail, for example. Turn it on. And what that does is if children search for mostly adult content on YouTube, it will not show up. It won't show up in the search, okay? But it is not perfect because some of the people who create, mostly it's adult content that it's blocking, they know how to change the titles of the videos so it can get around those kinds of filters that YouTube is trying to put in place. Last month, YouTube announced they're starting a beta for a new option called the YouTube supervised account. It is not available to all of us yet. I cannot wait until it is. I'll show you how to follow and stay in touch with me if you want to know when it's finally available. But what they're going to do is finally answer my kid is between 8 and 18 YouTube issues, right? They're not ready for the full YouTube, but they're too old for YouTube Kids. And this will allow you, in a kind of a similar way that TikTok family pairing works, for you to, say they can only see this kind of content. And as they get older, you can allow a little more. And then as they get older, allow a little bit more. And they're calling it explore more, and most of YouTube, okay? It's not ready yet, but at some point, I congratulate them. It only took 15 years, maybe 10 years for them to get to this point, but better late than never. All right. I'm going to pause here because I see some questions, a lot of questions coming up. And one question was, we lost you. You did lose me, but I'm back. The other question here, what was it called in Roblox? Okay, the Roblox setting, you just go to security settings. Go to security settings, turn on security settings. It requires a 4-digit code that set a code, then go back in and now change privacy settings for your kids so you can limit who's allowed to friend them, contact them, communicate with them. So that's how you do it in Roblox, okay? Another question, what about Fortnite? Actually, we'll talk about Fortnite in a minute, okay? Yes, many other questions about Roblox. Thank you, I'm glad that was helpful. All right, you use Google Family Link and blocked YouTube, but teachers use Google Classroom and they post links to YouTube. So they figure out, yeah, this is very complicated relationship we have with Google and everything they own, because Google Classroom is something our schools are using. Most schools use Google, by the way. And so this little sticky point between how schools are using things and how you prefer that in your home, this is where conversation between you and the school or you and the teachers is really important. So maybe it's a good idea to ask them, what sites are you planning on using, especially maybe not this year because it's almost over, but in the coming year, new teacher, what sites are you going to be asking our children to get on, and what settings are in place to make sure they're not going to access things that are not appropriate. You have every right as a parent to ask that question of your school. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to move on now, and we'll get to your questions a little bit later. All right. So just a final tool I wanted to let you know about. In my company, we're a technology company. We make a lot of tools to protect you from lots of things online, like viruses and spam and scams and you name it. Just last month, we decided to launch a new tool. It only works on the Chrome browser now. It's called Safe Filter for Kids. It's really interesting. We're testing it now. I would love for you to invite you all to download it. The URL is there at the top of the page. And what it does is, if an image comes up, even if the page is innocent, but the image might not be, it will blur it. It's just going to blur the image or blur the video, both video and image. So any of you, if you're willing to test it out, please go ahead and download it. It only works on Chrome browsers for now. We're still working on it, trying to get better, but I know this is one of the most challenging things for families. And I'm so thankful that our engineers chose to give some of their time to developing something like this. So I'd love for you all to give it a try if you get a chance. All right, on setting the rules. So one thing we want to think about is really just 5 things, not one, 5 things. What are they allowed to use? When are they allowed to use it? How long are they allowed to use it? Where are they allowed to use it? And with whom are they allowed to use it? And as you think about setting these kinds of rules, do it together with your children. Have conversations about not just what the rules should be. Ultimately, it's your decision. Get them to weigh in on the rules and get them to weigh in on the consequences if they break the rules, because they're more likely to not only abide by rules that they help set, but also abide by the consequences. And if they have siblings, do it together with all of them, because they will hold each other to account, as you probably have experienced in the past. So, on what they're allowed to use, an example of this is usually a child comes home and says, "Hey, Dad, Mom, can I please download Among Us?" How many people got that question last year? Maybe some of you are familiar with the game, maybe not. But Among Us was pretty popular last year. And I remember when my son asked me about it, I started doing some research. And at the time, there weren't a lot of reviews about it. So if you ever come up against an app or a game that just doesn't have a lot of reviews, you might want to stay away from it for a little bit. Or I'm a big fan of Common Sense Media. CommonSenseMedia.org is a fantastic resource to decide, is this app, video game, website, and by the way, even movies and television shows, are these okay for my children? Even if the app says 12, even if the app says 9, I still want to know more or whether or not it's okay. So I'm a big fan of CommonSenseMedia.org. Okay. By the way, all of the URLs and links that I've been saying, I'm going to actually send out to all participants after tonight, so you will be able to get all of them. So don't worry about having to write them down. Okay. Now I want to focus on when and how long after I get through this, because I have a trick called the 24-hour rule that you can use with your children to manage screen time. Okay. So where in the house? During the pandemic, everyone was in the house. But once it's over, maybe if you're already allowing your children to be in other people's homes, you might have different rules than another family. My example is When my son was younger, we did not allow him to play first-person shooter games when he was 9 and 10 years old. But there were other families that did. So, I basically had to be very explicit to say, I know he's going to go hang out with you, but we don't allow these kinds of games right now. Okay, just so you know. I recommend that you have those conversations with your children about what they're allowed to use and where, and do that also with other people where your children might be accessing technology or games. And finally, with whom, the younger they are, I think stick to the people they know. And as they get into middle school, those of you who have the 11, 12, 13 years old, you notice their circle got bigger. They start talking about kids you never met because their world is just getting bigger. So, I think if they've proven to you that they're responsible, allow them to start adding more names to the phone book of their phone, for example, or play with them on Fortnite or Minecraft or other kinds of social games. But start small as they're younger. Now, on the 24-hour rule, this is about the screen time issues. So one way to talk to kids about screen time is this, that it's really important they understand that there's only 24 hours in a day, okay? And I bring this up because a lot of parents over the past year have told me how guilty they felt because they just got to get something done, but the kids are home and go ahead, watch that thing or play that game or whatever. And then they're sort of riddled with guilt, right? But I don't think you should. I don't think any parent who made the decision, I think any parent had really challenging times and none of us should feel bad. I mean, who had a playbook for a pandemic with the existence of the internet at the same time? Nobody. So we should give ourselves a break for sure. But it's great to talk to kids about the fact that there's only 24 hours in a day. And a lot of that day, they have to, or they already are, doing things that are good for them. So sit down with them, either have them write it down or color a pie chart or just write it for them if they're not old enough yet to write it, to say, okay, let's talk about what we're doing in the 24 hours today. First question is, what am I doing? How many hours, how much time did I spend doing things that were good for my health, my body? How many hours did I sleep, have or help prepare meals, exercise or ran around outside, ride my bike, go for a walk, do a sport? How many hours? On top of that, how many hours did I spend to support myself as a learner? So how many hours was I in school? Doing homework, reading, maybe practicing a skill or a hobby like an instrument or a crafting skill, some kind of other hobby. How many hours? On top of that, how many hours did I spend supporting the relationships with the people that are very important to me in my life? So how much time did I spend with family, friends, neighbors, maybe family that was even far away, and maybe some of that time, by the way, was on Zoom, and that's okay, because that is time supporting a relationship, okay? Once you add all of that up, there's a little time left over, right? That time could be used for screens, but it doesn't have to be. It can be used for other things too, right? So what you can do with your kids on that time left over is, many parents create activity boxes where they write ideas. What could they do with this time on little pieces of paper, fold them up, put them in the box, or you can make a menu that they can pick from. And some of that time could be screens. Yeah, some of it could be just playing board games or doing something else that doesn't have anything to do with screens. But this way, our children start to understand, I have to do, well, there's all these other things I'm doing in my day. I can't spend all of it on screens, right? And it also helps you as a parent realize, maybe it's okay if some of that leftover time is spent with screens because they've done all these things that are really important and healthy for them. Now, when you add everything up, if that orange box equals 5, 6 hours, it does not mean they should be spending that much time on screens at all. That's where the tools that we talked about and the rules that you set, use the tools and the rules to decide how much of that orange box can be dedicated to screens or not. Okay. And in terms of setting the environment, I think setting a good example is finally, it's important that we ask ourselves, what rules do I have for myself? If I'm telling my child they can only be on it for so long, that's a rule. But do I have rules for myself? And do they see me following those rules? So I ask you to put in the chat, if you're at home and you're sitting down for a meal, what are your rules about screens at the dinner table? Or how do you stop work and start home life when maybe all of it is happening in your house? Do you charge your phone next to your bed at night or in a different part of the house like you expect your children to, that they don't have it in their rooms, but in a different place? What rules do you have for yourself? And if you don't have any, think about it, it's okay, but there might be some you might want to think about that your children know you have and see you following, so they will follow them too. And how do you role model that for kids? Okay. So I'm glad. Thank you for sharing some of your rules to no screens at the dinner table at all. I absolutely agree. So much research shows that one of the most important determining factors of a child's ability to succeed later in life is the quality of the conversation happening at certain times of the day, that there is this quality conversation time as families. It could be over a meal, but it could be over some other thing, right? So it's good not to have the distraction. So good for you. On being safe, we talked about making sure that we help our kids protect privacy information and their physical selves. Somebody asked me about Fortnite earlier. Okay, so it is important that in games, in every app, one way to protect your privacy, you turn on the privacy settings, right? I'm showing you here Fortnite screenshots. The most important thing you should know is almost every app and game your kids are using, privacy settings are not on by default. There's only 2 apps actually that have changed that. TikTok is one. For anyone under the age of 16, they have turned on privacy settings already. And the second one, I believe Instagram has decided to change that also, but they followed, TikTok was first to do that. So that means most of the stuff your kids are using, you got to get in there and turn them on. And here you're seeing the menu icon that is being highlighted. And, here, I've already set the privacy on here, but, you can decide in your game privacy whether it's just them playing with themselves, whether they can connect with friends, or whether they connect with the full public. So get in there and understand privacy settings of everything your kids are using. Okay. Now, here's an important thing about privacy, that if your kids are in that 11 to 14 and older range, it's a good conversation to have. A lot of the apps and games, mobile apps and games they use and social networks don't cost money, but are not free. Okay. And some of the older kids kind of get this already. What we mean by that is, even if you didn't spend money to download TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, you are paying with something else, and that is your personal information. And the way it works is this: we typically download an app and we kind of don't read all this legal stuff. We just go past it and we just hit I accept or I agree, right? Guilty as adults too. And we there's a clause in there that none of us ever read, and it exists in every free app, and especially the social networks. And that clause says in very simple language, I will say it in simple language. It's not written in simple language, but what it says is you own everything you do, post, say, everything you're doing here, right? You own it. But you give us the right to use it whenever, wherever, forever. When you hit I accept or I agree, part of what you're accepting or agreeing to is that exchange. Okay, so we didn't pay for the app, but we pay, but it's not free. Now, what does it have to do with privacy settings? The thing is, privacy settings protect our children and us from those we do not know. And they won't see what we're doing or saying or posting if we use privacy settings. But privacy settings do nothing to protect us from the companies who make these apps. They are tracking it and they are storing it. And if at some point they get hacked, then whatever it is they've tracked and stored is out there. So when we tell children, look, nothing online is really ever private, and be careful of what you post in the first place because it's not truly private. That's what we mean. We're not just saying it to scare them. It's truly the way of the business of free. Everything they've done is being collected by somebody and stored somewhere. And you hope that doesn't get hacked in any way. But if it does, then all of a sudden it could be public. So that is the reason when we tell kids it's never truly private, that is what we mean. We're not just trying to scare them. And I can tell you that has been very effective for me when I've gone into classrooms of middle school, junior high kids. And it's interesting because they get pretty mad. And I had a 5th grade girl ask me, can I please sue Instagram? And I said, did you hit I accept? And she said, yes. And I said, no, because that's what you agreed to. So that's why we should be careful and assume nothing's private. On our personal information, I will just say this. Cyber criminals are very crafty. And over the past year, they've been even more creative, trying to trick you to download something, to give up an email address, to click on something, to believe something. And the best way to protect your children and you from cyber criminals is to do what we talked about before. Make sure you have security software on every device they're using. Because maybe their little hands on that device, they didn't mean to tap on it, but they did by accident. And if you have security software and it leads them to a pop-up or a website that's actually malicious, the good security software products will block them from going there in the first place. So you're protected, okay? They're not trying to target your children. Your children don't have bank accounts. You do, though. So if your children are using their devices on your network where your devices are also connected to it, it puts you at risk as well. Okay. Okay, I've got another question for you here. And you can just use the polling. So, do any of your children own their own cell phone yet? So use the polling question. A, yes, no, B, no, C, not yet, but soon, and D, not for a few more years. So do any of your children own their own cell phone? Yes, no, not yet, but soon, or not for a few more years. Please go ahead and use the polling option. Okay. Okay. I'll probably end this in just 5 seconds here. All right. Wow. Awesome. So it looks like the majority of you said yes. Wow. Okay. And no is the next biggest group. Eventually, all of you will be yes, eventually. but maybe not now. So thank you for letting me know. And given that so many of you have children with a phone, I do wonder how many of you bought it just in the last year, by the way, just in the last year, maybe sooner than you were expecting, and that's fine. But I do want to have a couple of important conversations about the phone. And if you haven't had these conversations with your children yet, please do after tonight at some point, okay? It's the one feature about a phone that every kid loves is the camera, right? Camera. We can take selfies, take videos. It's the reason why TikTok is so popular. We can watch, I mean, we like to watch videos on it too and play games, and text our friends, but that camera is one of the best, most powerful features of that phone. There's a couple of things about it that we have been tracking over the past year, together with partners who've been doing this research. And one is that, unfortunately, maybe because we were home so much, that there's been a rise in images of children that they wouldn't want the whole world to see, if you know what I mean. And I'm not sure exactly who's on the line, so I don't want to be more explicit than that, but there are images of young children out there that they wouldn't necessarily want the whole world to see, but have been produced by themselves. So either they're being coaxed or enticed or somehow pressured or something to take those photos and send them to someone, and somehow it's getting out there. Or there's another reason that they're doing it, but whatever the case, whatever the reason, there has been a rise of it out there. And we need to tell our children that they should never feel pressured to take a photo like that or feel pressured to send it to anyone, and certainly not someone they don't know. But even if it's somebody they do know, someone who maybe they have a crush on who's pressuring them, even if it's someone their own age who's doing it, they should never feel that pressure, because technically the production is a felony. The creation, possession, and distribution of images of children in that position, of those ages, is technically a felony. They're not going to punish kids the way they would if it was an adult that was doing this. They're not. But I mean, a child would be devastated to know a picture of them like that was out there for others to see. So we should have these conversations about the camera. Use the camera in great ways. Take those TikToks for fun, take pictures of the dog and family and so on, but never feel pressured to take those kinds of self-images. The other thing is, I want to share something that happened 7 or 8 years ago. A father asked me this question and said, my kid he's a really good kid, and I've given him a phone, and obviously the phone bill's in my name. But what if someone sends him a picture like that? What should I do? Because the phone bill is in my name and he didn't ask for it, but he might get one. What should I do? So here is my advice to you. And this comes from many other organizations, including, law enforcement and school administration and so on. If your child ever receives a photo like that, encourage them to tell you immediately and then delete it. Okay? Don't be in possession of it, and certainly don't send it on to others, because that's distributing. And the reason is this. And another step is, if you know who the child is that sent it, or their parents, and you feel comfortable enough, you might contact them to let them know what's going on. If you don't know it, the child, or you're not comfortable addressing the parent of that child, I would definitely report it to the school, because what you don't know is if it's been sent to anyone else in the schools as well. But taking the act of deleting it, your child communicating, you deleting it, or he or she deleting it, and then reporting to the school is a good idea, because if there is an investigation, if an investigation proceeds, they are going to know that the image went from this phone to that phone. they're going to know anyway that it came to your child. So that is my advice. Okay. Now on gaming, I will say that we talked about this earlier. Almost every game is social now. Long gone are the days of Space Invaders, which was my day. I could only play Space Invaders with another person if they were sitting right next to me, but not some other place all around in another part of the world. And by the way, before I move on, someone has commented here, my daughter wants a phone. She's 11 and I'm not comfortable with letting her have one yet. You're not alone. You're not alone, okay? It is your choice. Every family has their own reasons for the age at which they think their child should have a phone, their own reasons, and we all need to respect each other for whatever those reasons are. But you're not alone if you've decided that your child is not ready for a phone yet. I can tell you from doing this for a dozen years, you're not alone. And I chose to let my child have a phone at 10 because that's when they started taking the bus away from me. And it was a Go phone. So all it could do was text 4 numbers. I prepaid $25 and it could run out. And they could only use apps on it when they were home on the Wi-Fi or I could oversee it. And over time, as they got older, and of course my kids are much older now, we moved on to a different kind of phone. But that was really good because they learned how to be responsible with the amount of time they spent on it because the money would tick down. So that's an idea. You're not alone, by the way. Don't worry. And if you've decided to let your child have a phone, you're also not alone. So again, every family has their own reasons. But what I will say on gaming is that because most of them are social now, there's some interesting things happening in gaming. And just like the previous conversation about the camera and images, you never know who that is that your child might be playing with. So I'm a big fan of 2 things about games. If you have a child that throws a tantrum when you tell them, hey, time is up, off the Xbox, and they kind of throw tantrums because they were just in the middle of that game, you might consider timed games. Okay, there are games that can go on and on and on forever, like Minecraft, actually. But then there are games that have time. So one I'm a fan of is Rocket League. Very innocent game where you drive cars and you try and have the car hit a soccer ball into a net. That's all that's happening. But I don't know, it's so popular. It's super popular game. And the time just runs down and then it's done. The game's over. FIFA, soccer, Madden, football, the hockey and NBA games are the same way. The time runs out and it's over. So, think about that for kids who you have a hard time pulling away from the games. You can also do the timers tools that we talked about and give your child warning, hey, 15 more minutes, 10 more minutes, and so on. One tool we didn't talk about for anyone who has an Xbox, Microsoft last fall launched Xbox Family Settings app. It's a free app where you, from your phone, can decide how much time they're on the Xbox. You don't even have to go to the Xbox, you just do it from your phone. So Xbox Family Settings app. Again, I'll be sending out a list of all these tools and links later on, so don't worry about writing it down. And finally, games have chatting functions, but some chatting functions have fixed text, and Rocket League is one of them. You can't just write free-form text. You can just say, hey, great game, or nice save, or nice shot, better luck next time. It's predetermined text that you can use. Other games, it's free form text. So, decide which of these games is better for your kid. Common Sense Media, great tool to decide, let you know about those features, okay? These next 2 sections are gonna go by a little more quickly, so I promise. And again, I apologize for the technical glitches earlier. I wasn't sure what that was about. On kindness. So be nice to others, do unto others as you would have done unto you. It's the right thing to do, right? They learn that at a very young age, how to treat each other in school. But for all of the reasons we talked about before, because nothing's ever permanent, because everything we're doing online is being tracked, because frankly, every move we make on the internet adds up to a picture of who we are. Everything we search, click on, like, download, post, watch, people we're connecting with, all of these things add up a picture to a picture of who we are. And so who do we want to be known as online? Every action matters. It reflects on us and it's permanent. Like I said, it's being tracked. So in addition to just being kind because it's the right thing to do, we've got to make sure our kids are also respecting other people's privacy. Here's an example. Those of you whose children have phones now, I don't know if you've allowed them to be on Instagram or Snapchat yet, but when they begin taking those group photos with their friends and post them, and let's say they love how they look in it, but the other people in it don't like how they look in it. This particular example has led to so much drama in middle schools. It starts arguments and talking behind each other's backs. Well, she posted that because she looks good, but the rest of us don't look good, and so on. So here's my advice. With their friends, it's not a bad idea to say, hey, you okay if I put this up? You okay if I post this? And you know what? Has it ever happened to you as an adult that someone you know posted a photo of you or your children on Facebook and didn't ask you and you weren't too happy about it? Has that ever happened to you? How does that feel? Right? So I think that we should instill in our children a good practice of, hey, everyone has different definitions of privacy and what they want online and not. So before you post something with you and your friends, it's not a bad idea to say, hey, are you okay if I post this? Okay, that's a good idea. It's respectful. We talked already about respecting other families' rules and values. Hey, that child doesn't have a phone yet. Everyone else does. You're all starting a group text and this child is excluded from that. So make sure they know what it is. If you're organizing everybody a birthday party or going to the park or something, make sure you don't exclude the child who doesn't have the phone yet. I can tell you from firsthand experience of having to navigate through that. And it takes a little work on our part, parents. It does. But if we all do it, we're in a better place. So make sure our children understand not everybody has the same rules. Not everybody is allowed to use this, that, or the other thing at the same ages. And that includes the amount of time they're allowed to be online. So I had a parent in maybe 2-3 years ago say to me, my daughter texted her friend and she didn't respond. So she went to bed all upset because she thought her friend was so mad at her, wasn't responding. It wasn't that. It was only that the friend was not allowed to use her phone anymore at that hour. That's the only thing that happened. So our children, we have to remind them not everybody's working on the same rules. Okay. And finally, for those of you with children starting to use social media, or maybe they're already there, we know for a fact that, and we know this as adults, that when you look at other people's lives, when you're scrolling through Facebook and you see, wow, look at what they did through the pandemic and their life looks so much better than mine and so on. Well, our children see that too, and our children experience that too. And because they're adolescents and children, they experience it even more intensely. So we have to remind our children that their value is not equal to the number of likes, followers, comments, whatever on social media. They are worth so much more than that. And it's up to us as parents to make sure that we're constantly reminding them of that and that they are doing other things that fill them up and not solely relying on social media as a measure of their value. So as parents, we can definitely be supportive by constantly having conversations. And I ask you to ask yourself 2 questions, write it down on a piece of paper. put it away, and hopefully you never have to take it out again. And those two questions are this: what would I do if my child was ever the victim of unkindness or bullying online? And the second is, what would I do if my child was ever the one being unkind to someone else? Think about those. Write down what are the things you would do. Who would you talk to? How would you respond? How would you feel as a parent? And be prepared rather than be surprised. And hopefully you will never have to take those pieces of paper out, ever. Show your kids what kindness looks like, be that example. And if you find examples, those stories, those feel-good stories you find on Facebook, share them with your kids so they know not everybody on the internet is awful to each other. There's lots of people still doing great things out there. I'm going to wrap it up here with being savvy on good habits and good uses. So, a few things here to think about. Many times we just don't know who's who, right, online. So it's very easy to take an image and make it your own and open an account, let's say on Instagram. So one trick that you could use to make sure, is this a real account or is it a bot? I have no idea. You can take the image that's with the account and do something called a reverse image search. A reverse image search, you just look that up on Google and you copy the image and you plop it in there and you can see if it's been used somewhere else before. Now, a lot of kids are actually pretty savvy about this, but that's the way that it's a good way of checking whether or not it's a real account or not. With information that we see online, a news story or some video, we don't know if it's real or not. We need to also encourage our kids and ourselves to pause. Don't just believe everything the minute you see it online, right? Just pause and ask some questions. Why was it made? Who made it? Were you able to, find another source that said the same thing or not? And without going into too much into this, we have a guide called the Parent's Guide to Media Literacy, and it shows you some scenarios that you can have these conversations with kids. They might have seen an ad for something and your child just says, I really got to have that because it says it does all these things. And this is a way to say, look, don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by that advertising. Maybe it doesn't do what it really says it does, and you shouldn't waste your money on it. They're just trying to fool you, right? So that's a resource for you. Has anyone ever looked up your own name on Google? Have you ever looked up your own name on Google? Put that in the chat. And if so, what did you find? What did you find? Did you find your cyber twin? Someone who has your name but is not you? I have found people who own businesses in San Diego, another one whom you can write in jail. There's a Lynette Owens you can write in jail. There's a Lynette Owens that owns this nice business in San Diego. There's many of us, but not all of them are me. So I recommend that as your children are using social media more, technology more than we did when we were their age, making sure what is out there about them is not a bad idea. But the way you can do that, you don't actually have to go searching their name every week. You can actually set up something what's called a Google alert. And I'm not going to play the video here because it might slow down my connection again. But if you go to google.com/alerts, you type in any word, phrase, or name, and you choose how often you want to be alerted, weekly, monthly, whatever. And anytime that name is publicly posted on the internet, you're going to get an email. You're going to get an alert. And just so you know, anything you post behind privacy settings is not going to show up. Nothing behind privacy settings is publicly indexable. So not to worry, nothing like that's going to show up if you search on Google. All right. But I highly recommend, as a good habit, set up a Google alert on your kids' names, because someday they might apply for a job, for college, for something else. And you want to know if there's anything out there that's not necessarily flattering about them, okay? The other reason is this, and I'm almost done. I know people are asking when I'm done, so I'm almost done here. Since 2014, we've been following the Kaplan Institute, and the Kaplan Institute surveys college and university admissions officers every year. So the most recent study came out in January, and they asked this question for many years now. Beyond the application they sent in, would you look students up on the internet to see what you would find? And the first year they asked it, 25% said yes. The next year, 30, 35, 40, and it just kept going up. And then they changed the question a bit 2 years ago. And they said, do you feel you have the right to look them up? So this year, 65% said yes. Yes, of course we will. If we need to, we're going to do that. But then they ask a second question, that is, what did you find? If you did, what did you find? And of the people who looked, 58% of them did find something that wasn't so flattering, and it made them decide, you know what, this is not the student we want here. But 42% said, we found something that was really impressive, and we are definitely decided to bring this student into our community. And that's a very interesting change in all of this, because in the past, they only worried that they would see something bad. But now they like it when they find something good. And some of them are saying, we don't want to find nothing. We don't want to find nothing. We actually want to find that your child, whatever they're really good at, has shown and practiced how to use the internet in really positive and productive ways. And this is why, as parents, we want to protect them on the internet, but we also need to encourage positive, good uses. And how can we do that depending on the age of our children? Well, if they're really young, they could be using the internet just to learn a new skill. You know, I think a lot of kids started liking things like cooking or a new hobby or something. They just using YouTube to learn, or the Khan Academy or something like that. But they could also promote a cause they really care about. Let's say there's a homeless shelter for animals or a food pantry that they want to raise money for. These are great ways of using the internet to raise money or raise awareness, and you're using the internet to do that, right? If your kid likes, if they're a good writer, athlete, musician, performer, you know, they are an artist, whatever it is, there are now more apps than ever for your child. Maybe you keep it behind privacy settings while they're young, but as you can start to build up a place where you're collecting all these accomplishments. And by the time they're in high school, they're already having to build a digital profile that they're going to share with others for jobs and college and so on. So practicing that skill and using those sites now and encouraging them as parents to do it, you know, early is a good way of using the internet. It's not just for having fun and watching cats, right? Playing Fortnite. Finally, another great way, enter contests. If they're good at certain skills, enter contests. There's lots of great contests for kids online. They don't have to win, but it's a wonderful way to practice how to stick to a deadline, how to follow rules, and how to compete, you know, with others. Hey, maybe they might win. That's great. But even if they didn't, they could collect all these entries that they ever put in for poetry or photography or, you know, music, or something like that. So I encourage you as parents, you know, we talked about being online, being safe, being kind, and helping our kids be safe, kind, and savvy. And, you know, I encourage you to stay active as parents, because I threw a lot of information at you tonight. But just because you came here and spent your night with me doesn't mean it's over. In fact, every time I give this presentation, there's new information coming all the time. So stay up to date, stay active, communicate with other parents in your community, obviously with your children, and with your schools as well, the teachers and the administrators in your schools, about the role that technology is playing in your children's lives. And I'll show you in a minute how you can stay up to date on newer things. We certainly invite you to come back to one of these next school year. We will be hosting these again next year. So all of you PTO and PTA leaders who are there, we invite you to come back and sign up for Family Tech Talk again when the new version comes out in the fall. And my challenge for you is, based on something you heard tonight, do one new thing. Whether it's setting up multi-factor authentication on TikTok, the security settings on Roblox, using TikTok family pairing, maybe, I don't know, any number of things that we talked about tonight. And again, for those of you who need attendance codes, the codes for your schools, I wanted to share that with you so you can see, look for your school. These are in alphabetical order. The number to the right of your school is your attendance code. And again, whatever email you use to log in tonight, I will send this out so that you have the code in your email, so in case you missed it. Okay, I'm going to get to the questions, but before I do, for those who have to go, you can find great resources at internetsafety.trendmicro.com. We actually provide lots of tip sheets in 10 languages. And we also host a webinar series on Wednesdays. And we actually have, our next one is May 26th. But if you just go to internetsafety.trendmicro.com, again, you'll find our resources, you'll find our webinars, and you'll find the blog that I write as well. For those of you who are leaving, again, the survey will pop up. It's just a couple of questions. I would love your feedback. Anything we can do better, please enter it there. I would really appreciate your feedback of how we can do this better. And if you don't have it pop up, this is the link. It's internetsafety.trendmicro.com/PTO today-feedback. But I'll send that in the email as well. It follows up. Okay. If you choose to include your email address in the survey, then you might be a winner of a copy of Trend Micro Maximum Security. That is security software that will protect up to 5 devices in your home. So I hope no obligation to put your email address. Don't worry about it. You can just do the survey. No worries. This is my contact information. I'm very active on Twitter, and I do post a lot of information about latest news of things going on. So that's a good place to stay up to date. If you have questions, you can email me at this address as well. For those of you who need to go, I thank you for staying. But those of you who have submitted questions, I'm going to try and group these as best I can and answer them now. And again, thank you so much for those of you who need to go for spending your time with me tonight. I'm going to get to the questions now. And if anyone wants to stay, please do, or keep adding questions if you like. If you have questions and you want to ask them in Spanish, please type them in Spanish, and I will ask Gigi to translate them for me, and then I will answer them and she'll translate it back for you. So my kids are able to get in the back door to YouTube. How do I block it? I think it's up to you. If you're using security software on their devices, there is a way to block YouTube using those parental controls. If they're using an iPhone, you actually can block under iOS screen time setting. You can actually block certain apps so they wouldn't be able to get onto YouTube. So that's one way. Finally, you can just remove the app from their device and require a password anytime they want to install a new app. So if you turn on that password is required for a new app, that's your way of blocking the usage of YouTube if they're still too young to use it. Has YouTube taken any steps to monitor content, meaning that kids can find a Paw Patrol video, but then it switches to something that's not appropriate? No, that is not the case right now. I think they are trying very hard. That's why, if you want to try that tool that we're testing it still, but, I'm hoping it would blur it for you once that inappropriate imagery comes up. And I will put the link for that tool, that free tool for you to give it a try. But no, this is one of the most difficult things to do is video filtering, because it can be so long and you don't know when the inappropriate content is coming. Will we be able to view this after you're completed? Yes, this presentation this evening has been recorded, and if you email me, we will send it to you by request. So we're only sending the link by request. The link will only last for a certain period of time, because we have more events coming in later in May, and the content gets updated each time. So but yes, this you can have a copy of the recording if you email me at the address there on your screen. I've contacted IT and the district and told there's nothing they can do about YouTube access. Well, I think the problem is they probably have a universal setting, because some people in the district need it while others, they don't want to use it. So I'll look into that a little bit more, but I think this has come up a few times now, and probably because more and more schools were doing remote learning, that this is becoming a bigger issue lately. But my recommendation is, having conversation with the school, and if it's a district-owned device, there's only so much you can do to it because it's not owned by you. But if it's your own device, you can filter YouTube by using some of the tools that we talked about, especially security software. Because if you go into parental controls, you can actually, you can block specific websites, including YouTube there. How to get free Xbox Live? I'm not sure how to get free Xbox Live. And if somebody's offering that on the internet, I'd be very suspicious of the offer, because there are a lot more hackers trying to fool people into that in gaming. All you have to do is give up your email address, and before you know it, you're getting spam of all kinds, and no chance you're ever getting Xbox Live. So I'm not sure how you get that for free, because I know it costs money to subscribe to Xbox Live. In some versions of it anyway, like Xbox Live Gold. Please mention that many of these photos and images that children post or share begin at a very early age, and it's not just the teenagers. Many young kids in elementary school are being exposed innocently exposing themselves. Yes, I think that's this concern about the use of the camera is why we have to have conversations at an early age. So, we really, if kids are being somehow fooled or pressured to take those photos and put them online, kids as young as 9 are being asked for images like that on the internet. So, have those conversations with your kids, please, of why they should never respond to that kind of pressure. How do you simply keep them off your phone? Well, you could hide your phone, I suppose. I think there are things you can do to lock it down. I believe Android phones have a way of making certain apps not visible when you turn on that setting, so the kids, there's nothing they can do with the phone at all. But if they're just getting a hold of your phone without you knowing, then I recommend you keep your phone very close to your person at all times. Why do we always have to wait for them to complete their task and save? Is that meaning when they're in the game? I think that might be the question, right? They've got to complete their game and then save it. Yes. This is why it's important, especially in gaming, to do warning time. Tell them 30 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 5 minutes before they get off, so they know, they're not surprised. Hey, 30 minutes left. I'm going to come back here in 10 minutes. You better save whatever it was you're doing, and then you're off it. So because kids work really hard to get to a certain point in a game and they don't want to lose all of that hard work. So it is understandable in some ways. I do understand why they feel that way. So you can avoid drama and meltdowns by just, doing that countdown with them and understanding that's why they've worked really hard to get to that point. So there's a feeling of accomplishment that they don't want to lose. My kid is constantly begging for V-Bucks. Hallelujah. Yeah, V-Bucks. There was a birthday party where my son only got V-Bucks for all presents from his friends. It was incredible. He basically got something that is nothing. It's pretend money for a video game. And I thought it was really funny. The V-Bucks, if you legitimately buy them, I think you're okay, but you are right to be concerned about scams. There are more and more scams happening, even with Robux. Those are the virtual money in Roblox. V-Bucks are the virtual money in Fortnite, where they say, oh, if you just enter here or spend this much money, you'll get this many V-Bucks. Be very, very careful of those because a lot of cyber criminals have been setting up fake websites purporting to give good deals on V-Bucks. My recommendation is stay away from those and just buy the real ones. You can buy them on Microsoft's online stores. You can buy them in Microsoft stores. I would not get them anywhere other than from, legitimate corporations. That's my recommendation. And as far as educating them on the scams, tell them they absolutely exist. Okay, those scams definitely are out there. Our researchers have shown a lot of examples of this, so just let them know, buy it from the legitimate places only. Okay. Okay, is there any way to remove unwanted information like your home address and family names from online? There is, and I have a couple steps that I can include in that email to everyone, but it's really important before you begin on a new site, turn the privacy settings on. Just turn them on. Because if you don't, then the companies who are collecting it might actually be selling it to marketers, right? So you have no idea where some of this data is going after a while. And try and limit the amount of times it's going to get out there by don't enter it if you don't need to, and turn on privacy settings immediately before you start really using an app. But there is a way to kind of get some things removed out there. But I'll try and remember to include that in my follow-up email for sure. My daughter received a text from someone and she let them know they had the wrong number and she blocked them, but they're still able to text her. Is there anything she can do? Yeah, if it's constant and if it's really disturbing and frightening, I would report it. I would definitely, because they can be an investigation of the IP address and who's actually doing it. But you largely should be able to block numbers. But if someone keeps coming at her from another number, then I would definitely report that to authorities because there could be something else going on there. So once you do that, they can track them. They can definitely track them down. Participant records, yeah, I just showed it earlier on the screen, and I'm going to send it out with the follow-up email, so you'll see the participant codes for your school in that email. Will the survey pop up at the end? Yes, the survey is going to pop up once you close out of Zoom. That should pop up for you. Thank you for asking. And will we get a recording? Yes, I will. You need to email me for a recording. You need to email me at that address. I won't include it in the follow-up email to all participants. It's only available on request. So if you need a copy of the recording, please email me at the address that you see on your screen. Okay. All right, I have YouTube blocked. Use Google Family Link, good for you. Then they go on Google and the classroom teacher puts a link of YouTube. Yes, how do I block this when the school won't tell teachers to stop posting YouTube? And it's even your own device, but then they can't see what the teacher posted. So I would have an explicit conversation with a teacher so they tell you when in the week your child will need to look at a video on YouTube so you can unblock it temporarily and then block it again. I think teachers, this is an awkward period but I do think parents and teachers need to work together to say be more proactively saying, hey, parents, I'm going to be asking your kids to use this site for this period of time. And then after that, I'm not going to ask them to be there anymore. Are you okay with it? And so on. So that would be my recommendation. Like I said, we're not quite in a place where we could, where I think there are common practices yet. So let's see, a question, ¿en cuál escuela vas? I would like to answer that question, but Gigi, I don't know if you're there. I can listen. Actually, I don't see you here for listening to, I'm not able to. So I don't know, Gigi, if you're able to put in the chat what this question actually is. And I'll answer the next question. When do we submit school participation code? So your PTO or PTA leader might ask you to submit a participation code, and that's when you would submit it. So whoever your PTO or PTA leader is who set up your attendance for tonight, that's when you would submit the participation code. Okay? Okay. Great. Well, I'm not sure if we lost Gigi already. We might have. So I will try to get to that question later on. So I want to thank you. No more questions still at this point. For everybody who stayed on, which is quite a lot of you, I'm very impressed. And I knew that this would be a lot of questions tonight because of the size of our audience this evening. So I thank you so much for everything that you've done this past year to get you and your families through it. I wish you all the best as you finish out the school year. I hope you get some rest, relaxation, and peace over the coming months, over the summer. And I wish you all the best as you launch your new school year this fall. I hope you did get something out of it tonight. And please follow me on Twitter, fill out the survey, email me with questions. We will follow up with all participants on a lot of the links and resources tonight. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. My Spanish isn't great, but I know how to say that. And we hope that you will join us again next year for another Family Tech Talk night.